Well, hello. For this short video clip, I want to bring out a very key insight that's very aligned with where our industries and our society is going, to a more automated AI thing. You know, we're going to looking to go to driverless cars. We're looking to go to pilotless airplanes, where in some cases the pilot for a little bit may be on the airplane and it may be down on the ground just handling a computer that's flying the airplane. And there's a couple of things we need to think about, because as I've worked with pilots a lot of times, I see evidences where the pilots that I am training or evaluating have been trained to just make certain assumptions of just going through the squares. And it's one thing to do that, but it's another thing to go, when that system doesn't work, when Murphy's Law comes on stage on this flight, can that client handle it? Can they process the information? And it's this aspect of neuroscience, then how people need to be prepared to handle it when things are not expected, when the automation doesn't work. There's a very good picture of this from the early on in the space program with the Mercury program. Those that perhaps are as old as me may remember that in the Mercury program, Gordon Cooper was the youngest Mercury astronaut, and he was the last Mercury astronaut to go into space alone. But it was very interesting in the movie The Right Stuff. They kind of played a part in there where that I think was relevant to that stage in the development of the space program. There was a place where the astronauts were trying to say, what if this doesn't work? And the engineer was saying, backups, our knowledge, this will not happen. And they just said, what if it did? Well, what was interesting is in the real Mercury program, Gordon Cooper on his spacecraft was the only one that had to actually pretty much manually fly it back from space because of a lot of the systems that failed. A lot of the computerized aspects that would handle all of that had failed, and he pretty much had to manually fly it back, which can be very challenging. So my point is just, I want to kind of get you in this idea that, you know, society is going to a lot of automation. We're seeing talk about driverless cars. We're seeing talk about pilotless airplanes, just carrying people here and yonder. Well, the bottom line is, what if the system doesn't work? Can the person that's in charge truly handle that? Are they prepared up here to truly do that? I was working with a Challenger client who was a retired airline guy, and he was going to be flying a Challenger sort of as his retirement job, just to still keep having fun with flying even after he retired. And at one point in the flight, he said, so how do you want me to do this? And I said, you're the pilot today. I'm just drinking margaritas back here. And I smiled. I said, you're the pilot today. We got in the debrief and we were chatting about that for a second. And he said, you know, Randy, you're dead right. He said, I think back on it. And he said, even throughout my airline career, he said the instructors and the examiners both just literally just talked you through it. And I said, what do you think about that approach now? And he said, not very much. I said, good, lesson learned. The bottom line is, we got to get people to understand and be able to engage and process and make decisions, and not just shut their brains off and depend on automation. And so the bottom line is, when you talk about these situations with the automation, can you handle it? When you're talking about your team operate in this high-tech arena, are you ready when that piece of equipment doesn't work now? Can you decide? How are you developing your people? Are you developing them to handle it when all the automation goes away? Because there's a massive power thing. Perhaps a lightning strike hits it airborne and all the automation quits. Very interesting on that. It's interesting that most of us are well aware of, perhaps several decades ago, I remember, and this is probably 30 years ago, 30, 40 years ago, but you remember we had robots that could learn how to play chess games. And what they found was that these robots could learn based on the games they lost, based on their move choices and patterns. True. What they found is that when robots would play games for the first, I'll just pick a number, 5 or 10 games, they would lose, but they would pretty much win every one after that because they had learned how to make that work. My question to you is, when you think about this neuroscience aspect and the development of team members in a changing, unstable environment like this, it's automated. What if, when you're talking about airplanes, you, the one that's listening, are the one that had to sacrifice your life because of the situation for the computer to learn, or for the automation to learn, because the situation was not what was in the data banks. Because not everything is. And so it's a real good picture on this aspect that I just leave with you. Don't just depend on the automation. Is the automation valuable? Yep. Is it good? Is it useful? Most times, yep. But are you really training your people? You do have to train them in the use of the automation, but are you also developing their ability when that automation doesn't work? How do you do that? How do you need to do that better for your team when the situation's totally different? They're aware of it, they can function, they can make decisions, and bring radical results at the point of attack.